we've really had to say, we understand this is all related. Our mission is still about air quality because, frankly, the research is pretty evident now that shows air quality is pretty much the canary in the coal mine for greater climate issues that are going to start happening in an area. So measuring air quality is one of the primary ways you can tell that your climate overall is changing where you live.
Hello, and welcome to the December 26, 2025 edition of the TriDoc podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Zankoff, the TriDoc, an emergency physician, triathlete, triathlon coach, and multiple Ironman finisher, coming to you, as always, from beautiful, sunny, and far too warm Denver, Colorado. Far too warm, yes. It's unseasonably warm Christmas this year. It's been a little bit crazy. The voice to begin the program, that one that you heard just before I started talking, was that of my guest today. That is Leslie Keener. Leslie is the Salt Lake City-based director of the Running Up for Air race series, a series that benefits a charity that works to bring awareness to air quality and tries to show runners and endurance athletes all across the country in an ever-growing number of events how they can impact local air quality and air quality across the country. Before we get to that interview with Leslie, though, you are going to hear the final medical mailbag of 2025. That is going to feature an answer to a listener question about a supplement that I had not heard of before, and neither had my colleague, Coach Juliet Hockman. We are going to be looking into the benefits, or at least purported benefits, of something that you take before working out. It is a supplement called SportLegs. Is this something that you should be thinking of as something that is going to benefit you in your workouts, or is it something that you can potentially take a pass on? We are going to look at the science, what science there is on that supplement that comes from Colorado, actually, just up the road in Longmont, Colorado. We are going to take a look at that supplement and give you a sense of whether or not it is something that you can use on this Boxing Day to use the money that you get from any gifts you may be returning to the store today or over the weekend. Should you use that money to buy SportLegs, or is this something you can give a pass? We'll let you know very shortly. This is, of course, the final episode of this podcast for 2025, and it has been a very interesting year in the year of multisport. We had a sensational Ironman Pro Series. We had a interesting T100 professional series as well that went throughout the year. It began all that time ago back on the North American side anyways, at Oceanside, where we had a, as always, fantastic professional race, and ended just recently at the La Quinta race, where, at least in North America, at the same time, we had races in Bahrain, we had races in Qatar, we had races all over the world, and in between, we were treated to just a sensational amount of racing, both professionally and in the age group ranks throughout the year. There were stories that are memorable, like the epic battle that we saw in Kona this year between the women at the front of the race, Lucy Charles-Barkley and Taylor Knibb. I don't think that will be a story that anyone will soon forget. We had tremendous racing in Nice, the final time that we will see the Ironman World Championship battled for in such an amazing place with its incredibly difficult course, where we saw a Norwegian rookie take the win on the men's side. Of course, a Norwegian rookie took the win on the women's side as well, after Knibb and Charles-Barkley had their incredible collapses late in the marathon. We had 70.3 World Championship races that went equally exciting. We had the men coming down to a sprint finish with Jelle Gaines taking the tape over Christian Blumenfeld, and on the women's side, Lucy Charles-Barkley redeeming herself for what happened in Kona with the win at the 70.3 distance. And along the way, we had all kinds of excitement in the T100. We had, of course, Hayden Wilde just dominating the circuit despite having a horrific bike crash early in the year. After really starting off very well, he was derailed by a really bad bike crash and made just a tremendous recovery to be able to come back on the back half of the season and win pretty much everything in sight. The T100, though, didn't really distinguish itself this year. They had that fiasco in Dubai. They had a lot of fits and starts, as has been the case as this organization continues to try and find its footing. They now have a big merger coming with World Triathlon, and they are going to be essentially taking the reins from World Triathlon, it would seem. And yet I find myself wondering, can this organization that doesn't really have this great of a track record, are they the ones that we want to be representing triathlon at the level of the Olympics? I guess we're going to find out, because I don't really see that we're going to have much of a say in the matter or much choice. So time will tell. We'll see what happens after 2028 when the World Triathlon hands over the reins for Olympic triathlon after LA. So we'll see what happens. And 2025 was also a great year for this podcast. And of course, I could not have done that without you, my listeners. We have seen great growth here together, and that is a testament to your continuing to tell others about the podcast that I adore bringing to you, and that obviously you like listening to, because you have shared it with people, you have continued to leave ratings and reviews, and that means the world to me, and I can't thank you enough for it. We've seen great growth in numbers. We have seen continued interesting questions coming through on the TriDoc podcast Facebook group and by email. And with those interesting questions, the podcast looks really healthy heading into 2026. Juliet and I will have some really fascinating things to talk about. The interns are busy doing research on all of the things that you keep asking about. So keep it coming. I am excited to continue this journey with you. It is something that I very much enjoy doing, and something that I am hopeful will continue to be a source of information for all of you as we move into the new year. As 2025 comes to a close, somewhat difficult year in the world outside of multisport. If you are living anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, you will know what I'm talking about. I don't really want to insert too much of the real world into the what I guess is a respite from that. Here on the TriDoc podcast, we all have to acknowledge that things are not necessarily that easy on a day-to-day basis, but I am very hopeful that you are listening to this having spent a very pleasant holiday period with your family, that you are healthy, that you are rested, and you are heading into the new year feeling ready to go, ready to light the candle under your motivation bonfire that is going to get you moving in 2026. I look forward to being with you, to helping you find your way forward, and as always, bringing you information on what the best means are to train, to race, and to recover. Thank you for being here. I am absolutely privileged and find it to be a true honor to be speaking to you every couple of weeks. With that, let's move to the medical mailbag. Coach Juliet will be here with me just on the other side of this. It is the Boxing Day edition of the TriDoc podcast. It is time for the medical mailbag. We are cycling through our serotonin that we have from our turkey dinner last night. We have enjoyed all of our new gifts, our new technology that we're going to be employing in a triathlon next year. But joining me right now to talk about all of this and, of course, answer a new question from a listener is my friend, my co-host, Juliet Hockman. How are you, Juliet? Are you enjoying your Boxing Day morning?
I am. Do you know the origin of why this is called Boxing Day?
Oh, I'm so glad. I have read various
I've read
versions of
two
this.
things. What have you read? Yeah.
So the big one, and the one that's like always stuck with me, is it's just about you put things back in the box and you bring it back. But that always seemed, I don't know, too flippant. But I think there's probably something British to it. So why don't you give me the British version?
So I've heard that secondary one as well. Not so much do you take it back to the store, but you put all the decorations away in boxes and you pack up Christmas. Yeah, but I think that its real origin is this is actually the day that you gave gifts to all the help.
Oh,
and so you
that's
gave
super
boxes of gifts to all of your huge household staff of 25 or 30 people, from the footman to the dairymaid to the, I don't know, whatever. And that because
the
of
lords
course,
of leaping, the maids of milking,
because Christmas Day they were serving you, right?
Yeah.
And then on the next day they get the day off and you give them gifts. That's what I thought it was. And my family's British, so I feel like I have a little bit of a credible source there.
I like that.
What did you heard?
Just what I said about putting
Okay.
things away and about
Oh, okay.
returning things to the store. And I always liked the Bob and Doug McKenzie version, which was you have Boxing Day, and that's followed by Wrestling Day.
Oh,
So, anyways,
I had not heard that one.
you
Okay.
haven't heard the Take
No.
Off, eh? You haven't heard their version of the 12 Days of Christmas?
No.
All right, I'll send it to you afterwards.
All right.
Anyways,
So
we are actually recording this before Christmas, but you will be hearing this after
on
Christmas.
Boxing Day.
We
Yeah.
certainly hope that you all had a wonderful holiday and that you will now sit back next to the fire, enjoy whatever gifts that you did get, and listen to another episode of the Medical Mailbag. And we have a listener question to answer. We always love when we get those. So, what are we looking at today, Juliet?
So this question or this product, I was saying to you before we started recording, is probably amongst the most outrageous. I'm just going to put it out there right away. I'm just going to show my bias from minute one here. This is one of the most ridiculous products I think I've seen. Anyway, it's a product called SportLegs, and it is from a company in Longmont, Colorado, so your home state. And what it claims to do is to basically reduce the production of lactic acid during a workout so that athletes can perform, can push through the pain, push through the burn, or perhaps eliminate the burn altogether and push themselves to another level workout after workout. And you dose yourself according to your body weight. And they've been reviewed and acclaimed by such huge medical sources like USA Today and Bisley Magazine. So it must be true. But I know that your intern team did a deep dive on this to understand what this product said it does and the science behind it claims. So what did you guys find out?
Nina Takashima was the intern that looked at this, and she started our meeting by saying, this was one of the easier ones I've had to do because it was a pretty straightforward answer. The concept behind SportLegs is, I don't really know where this theory came from, but it's an interesting one, and we should just give a little bit of background to it. So I was telling you before we started that in biochemically and physiologically, our bodies strive to maintain what's called homeostasis. And we have all of these very intricate and complex sort of systems that are just all working to make sure that no matter what we do to ourselves, the internal milieu remains as constant as possible. So you want to go out and run in the heat? We have all of these systems that are going to work to cool you off. You want to go ski in the cold? You have a whole bunch of other systems that are going to work to raise your body temperature and keep you warm. You want to drink a whole bunch of free water? Well, that water is going to get absorbed and start to dilute your electrolytes, your sodium, and all of the things. You have a ton of different processes that all happen automatically to get rid of that free water, to make sure that your electrolyte levels stay as constant as possible. So the concept or the theory that SportLegs is based on is leveraged on this idea of homeostasis. And the idea is that our cells don't like to produce lactic acid, which is true. It's not something they do normally. They really produce lactic acid under conditions where there is an outstripping of supply and demand. So we're pushing our body to do exercise or do whatever it is we're doing beyond the ability to provide oxygen to fuel the exercise. And once we do that, then our cells tip over into what's called anaerobic metabolism and start producing lactic acid. And this results in you can feel the lactic acid. If it feels uncomfortable, it makes you feel a little bit nauseous when it gets into the bloodstream. It makes that sort of burning sensation in your muscles, at least temporarily, and then it all resolves, goes away. The idea is that these folks at SportsLegs have come up upon is that, well, the body doesn't like to have lactate, so maybe we could saturate the system with lactic acid beforehand. And that way we will shut down all of your cellular mechanisms because we'll show the cells that, hey, look, there's all this lactic acid around. And so your cells are going to now shut down the processes by which lactic acid is going to form. And therefore we can inhibit this process. So by providing exogenous lactic acid, endogenous lactic acid won't form. And so therefore we're going to allow you to now be able to perform with a higher VO2 max, so they say, and you won't produce lactic acid. It's going to be this amazing sort of idea. And on paper, it sounds great, but the question is, does it actually work?
Doesn't
So
work. Yeah.
if you go to their website, and this is a great example, and we've talked about this, Juliet. I've told you, like, a lot of these things. Go to their website, look for their science,
Right.
and to their credit, Sportlegs has a science page, and on their science page, they list a bunch of papers. The problem with these papers that they list are that none of the studies they talk about actually talk about their product or actually talk about the mechanisms that are actually being used in this whole idea. They say that Sportlegs is a supplement that's composed of lactate compounds. So you and I were talking before, I should clarify, lactic acid is what our cells produce. That dissociates into a hydrogen ion, which is the acid, and then lactate, which is an anion, a negatively charged compound. Lactate can be combined with other positive chemicals. So you can make calcium lactate, you can make magnesium lactate, and that's what these guys have done. They've packaged calcium lactate, magnesium lactate, vitamin D, and they put it into a capsule. You drink this, you take this capsule, and then you flood your system with lactate, so they say. And you're supposed to take it 30 minutes before exercise. You're going to get your blood lactate levels high. Now, lactate, interestingly, can be used as a source of fuel. And our bodies, when we get into anaerobic metabolism, we're producing all this lactate. That lactate gets cycled back into our processes, our metabolic processes, and actually gets used as a fuel. It's not particularly efficient, but it does work. But taking in all this lactate ahead of time doesn't really work that way, simply because our body would much prefer to do aerobic metabolism using glucose. So having all this lactate sitting around, basically your liver is going to clear it very rapidly, because the liver clears lactate quickly, turns it into bicarbonate. So I thought it was interesting, because we have, on one hand, we have all these products and all these companies telling you, take bicarb, take lots of bicarb to buffer your lactate. And now we have another company telling you, take all this lactate.
Lactate. Yeah.
Yeah, just fill yourself up with lactate. It's going to do so well. So on their site, again, they tell you why or what they're giving you, but they tell you they have all this science, but none of the science is actually related to their product and whether or not it works. So we went out, and really we is Nina. Nina went out and she found a few studies. She found one from 2024, the influence of acute oral lactate supplementation on responses to cycle ergometer exercise, a randomized crossover pilot clinical trial. It's all in the title in terms of how they did the study. Everything's there except what the results were. And that's great. So basically, they took a bunch of people, they gave them this oral lactate, they popped them onto a cycle ergometer, and then they crossed them over, so that they were, on one hand, getting the experimental stuff, and then they were getting the placebo, and they compared. And wouldn't you it? Nothing. Zip. They looked at VO2 peak, VO2 ventilatory threshold. They looked at lactate threshold relative to placebo. They looked at all kinds of stuff, and there wasn't a hint of difference between placebo or loading with lactate in these athletes. And they had 15 athletes here, 9 of them men, 6 of them women. So again, a nice
Distribution. Yep.
Yeah, good distribution. That study not particularly revealing in terms of any real benefit. We have another one, effective magnesium lactate dihydrate and calcium lactate monohydrate, which is exactly what you're finding in this compound. On 20-kilometer cycling time trial performance, this is from a little while ago, 2012. And it was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Only 9 recreational to competitive athletes, mostly men, but 2 women in there. They did 4 separate trials on 4 separate days with a minimum of 1 day recovery between. They did 1 VO2 max test to determine fitness and perceived exertion, and then they did 3 20-kilometer cycling trials. And they were consuming placebo or SportsLegs before 1 hour before each of these trials. And so again, they didn't know what they were taking. They crossed over. They served as their own control.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, again, no difference in anything. No difference in the time that it took for them to do the 20K, no difference in the power they put out, no difference in their heart rate. Perceived exertion was slightly higher for the placebo. I don't really know what that I'm supposed to take away from that, given
Right.
that's a very subjective sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But and then we just that was the only two real studies we found on this. We did find another one: effects of oral lactate consumption on metabolism and exercise performance. Just basically talking about the theory of all of this, and really just not giving it. It didn't look an experiment at all. So basically, there's really not a lot out there on this. But what there is out there on this is that it doesn't work.
Right.
And I was quite surprised to see a very slick website with some pretty big anecdotes, big testimonies about how. What did they say about the Tour de France? It
Yeah,
won't get you.
it's legal to use, and you won't get it works, and you won't get kicked out of the Tour de France. I think was the line, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, actually works, and you won't get you kicked out of the Tour de France. It's funny that you have that reaction to the website because, first of all, the name, I immediately thought of frog legs. Maybe I was hungry. I don't know. But anyway, that was
It's
my,
funny when I'm hungry, I don't think of frog legs.
I don't either, but I don't know if, I don't know. Anyway, that was my first thought. Like, what marketing committee sat around and came up with that name? But anyway, and then when I went to the website and I saw the way it was laid out, I thought, oh my God, I could have created this website. This is like a 5-panel standard WordPress website. There's nothing exciting about it. I don't even think it's a great website. But anyway, I may have been pre-biased. Yeah.
The interesting thing though is that I started looking around and this is out there. Like people are using this
People are
stuff.
using it.
And it's not inexpensive. I guess as supplements go, it's one pack of 120 is $35. And depending on how much you weigh, you have to
Yes.
take as many as I think you have to take as many as 4 or 5 of these tablets before your exercise. And now there were a couple of things that came up also in looking at some of these other studies. Nina found a paper looking at just like oral supplementation with lactate, and she found that a lot of these times when you take these oral lactate supplements, most of it doesn't even get into your blood. So even if the theory about saturating
Was
your blood
sound.
was sound, the practice is not actually bearing out because the stuff you're putting into your gut is not making it into your bloodstream, at least at levels that would do what the theory suggests it might do.
Yeah.
But it's all predicated on this idea that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because
Yeah.
we see in medicine, we see patients who come in with extraordinarily high lactates for a couple of different reasons. You can develop lactate because there's a type 1 lactic acidosis is where you're basically your system is just not you're not getting enough oxygen to your cells, and that happens in shock basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's type 2 lactic acidosis, which is oxygen delivery is fine, but your mitochondria are not working properly because they're inhibited by a poison or a medication or whatever. And in those situations, then lactates they just skyrocket. You'll see patients with lactates of normal lactate is less than 4. We'll see patients with lactates of 30, 40, just crazy numbers. And in the type 1 lactic acidosis, which is just think about an athlete, you can get high, 10, 12. It gets pretty high. And just the fact that it's rising doesn't stop the production. Like it just doesn't happen that way.
Right.
We know from real world situations of illness that the rising levels of lactate does not inhibit further production. So it seems crazy to me that somebody would think that saturating the blood with lactate in a healthy person would somehow inhibit the production down the road. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, and this came up in a study, understanding what is lactic acid and its impact on performance. A lot of people had this idea that delayed onset muscle soreness or just that soreness you have in your legs after a hard effort for several days.
Yeah.
People thought that was related to lactate and that you have to wait until the lactate gets cleared out of your muscles. That is not the case. We know better now. We know that lactate is actually cleared very rapidly, usually in the order of no more than half an hour to an hour after you cease exercise. Any burn or any discomfort you feel in your muscles afterwards is related to the micro tears and really just the damage you've done to your muscles, which is we know is necessary to actually build them up and make them stronger and more resilient. And that's part of training, right? So when you do a hard effort and you feel sore afterwards, it's not from lactate, it's from that micro trauma that has to be repaired. Lactate initially, though, does cause some burn. When you get anaerobic, you may feel some burn in the muscles. That can be due to lactate locally, but that goes away very quickly, as we know. So it's yet another one. Like you said, this one's a little bit, but yeah. And this came from a listener. I do want to give credit to the listener. It was Forrest Ellis, right? I think that was the name of the
I don't
listener.
remember if you mentioned who it was. I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if I
sent you
saw
the
it.
name,
So
but I believe that was the
okay.
name. Forrest Ellis sent us in. So thank you very much
No,
for
Ellis the
sending
other
that
way
in.
around. Ellis Forrest.
Ellis Forrest. I
Ellis Forrest.
apologize.
Thank you, Ellis. Yeah.
Ellis Forrest. Thank you for sending that question in. Ellis actually, I think, was curious because I think he had tried it and wanted to know if it was worth continuing. And so, Ellis, I want to tell you, please save your money. Use your money for something better. This is definitely not
Good
really.
use of funds.
Yeah, not a
There's so
good
many
use of
things to spend
funds.
our money on in triathlon. We might as well spend it on something that works.
Yeah, I would send any unused product over to GusCat. We're still trying to locate
Oh God.
our friend. Hey, he's always looking for shortcuts.
Yeah, apparently. Okay.
It
You're gonna find out
continues.
it really is a person and not a chat bot, and then you're gonna be in trouble.
No trouble here. No trouble
Yeah.
here.
Mm.
All right, that's all we've got for this last episode of 2025. We have a good one coming up in 2000 to start off 2026.
Yes,
We are
excited for that
finally
one.
going to address the why question. I'm looking forward to that. Juliet, do you have any last wishes for 2025 before we sign off?
Yesterday was the shortest day of the year. It also happened to coincide with the last day of Hanukkah for those of you who celebrate that. And so I feel like now everything is just going, the days are getting longer, light is returning. You can look at this in all kinds of ways metaphorically. Hang in there for these last few dark days, and we'll see you at the beginning of the year.
I love that you mentioned that because I love to tell my kids, like, oh, I could totally feel the days longer today.
This morning is 7 o'clock. I'm like, it's still dark. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's like what? It's a minute or two longer the day
I
today. And
know.
I
I
don't
know.
care. The day is finally
It's
longer than it
getting
was
longer.
yesterday. And
Going the right.
I love to send our friend Kelly a message on this day and tell her, you're on the downswing. We're on the
Yes.
upswing.
Yes. You should explain that Kelly lives in Australia. So she's
She
got the
does.
opposite.
Yeah. Of course, she lives in a place where it doesn't, winter is not really much
No.
to fuss about.
No.
But yeah, same as you. As heading to December 21st is just drives me nuts. And then as soon as we're on the other side of that, I just feel so much more buoyant.
It's a good thing to convince yourself of, since we still have to weather January and February.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
a nice
But I could
idea.
do it.
Yeah.
I could do it now.
Yes,
The
you
hard
can
part's
totally do
over.
it.
The sad part for me is that the summer solstice just feels like it comes way too early. Yeah, I
know.
just feel like July and August, I don't want the days getting shorter. They need to
I
stay
know.
longer. All right.
Yeah.
Enough about that. All right, guys. We really appreciate you being here for another year. We are so grateful. I just can't say enough about it. And thanks. And thanks for all your questions. Please keep them coming. We have nothing but enthusiasm to get your questions answered and to help you understand where you should be spending your money for the best ways to train, best ways to recover, and the best ways to race. All right. We will see you next time, Juliet, in a new year. Enjoy the last waning days and Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you then.
Same to you. Thank you.
My guest on the podcast today is Leslie Keener. Leslie currently serves as the program director for the Running Up for Air series, or RUFA, a collection of endurance events that has been created to amplify informed dialogue and empower organizations that are actively working on air quality solutions. The proceeds from Up for Air events are directed at carefully selected nonprofit groups who demonstrate high-value influence strategies. RUFA currently has 7 races across 4 states of the United States and is looking to expand both within the U.S. and internationally in the near future. In addition, RUFA, in partnership with Patagonia, has hosted an International Day of Clean Air that saw 252,000 people participate. But for now, in a much smaller group of people, just the two of us, Leslie is here to chat with me on the TriDoc podcast, and I couldn't be happier. Leslie, thank you so much for taking some time to join me here today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So we got a chance to meet on the Global Sustainability Group where we were talking about clean air and air pollution really as it pertains to endurance sport. And that's where I learned about the really, I think, exciting series that you have been working with. Can you tell my listeners a little bit about where it came from, what was the genesis of it, and how it got to be where it is today?
Sure. It has a really interesting background in that it was essentially one man who really wanted to make a difference. Our founder is Jared Campbell, who a lot of people might know from his Hard Rack 100 or the Barkley Marathons fame. He's been in a lot of those documentaries, but while he was training for particularly the Barkley Marathons, that race is in early spring. So, what that means is his heaviest training here in Utah was in the thick of our winter. And so, what he is famous for is finding really awful bushwhacky routes straight up and down a mountain. He gets a lot of vert really quick. We have one particular mountain at the featured in Salt Lake Valley that's called Grandeur Peak, and particularly the west side of it. It's about 2.2 miles up, and you gain 3,300 feet in those 2.2 miles. That was his training ground for Barkley. He would do laps up and down Grandeur. And what we have here in Salt Lake in the winter is something that we now call an inversion, and is commonly known as that, where the cold air traps pollutants below the cloud level, particularly because we're in a valley between mountains. So Jared was experiencing this phenomenon where he started at the bottom at his house in Salt Lake. Everyone at that point in time, this is like 2010-ish, said, wow, it's a really cloudy day out. We just have cloudy days in the winter. It's cloudy. He starts ascending up the mountain. At some point, about a third of the way up or halfway up, you get above the clouds, which we know now is the inversion, and it's a bluebird day. And this was top of mind where he was summiting the mountain, realizing that the clean air was up top, descending back into it every time and thinking, wow, my family and friends are all living in this. This can't be good. And what can we do about this, both to bring awareness and to bring change?
Can I just interrupt you for just a second
Yeah.
because I want to hear the rest? But we
Yeah.
also deal with that inversion here in Denver. I just want to point out that when you talk about the inversion, you're not talking about necessarily trapping the warm air, which is what is happening, but you're trapping pollutants, really. It's the
Correct.
cloud was not moisture. The cloud is actually smog and air pollution.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that's an important distinction to make is that early 2000s is when I moved here. And that is a lot of the language we heard is, oh, we get really cloudy days in the winter. People were describing it as cloudy, but not understanding it was because the cold air of moisture was trapping the warmer air beneath. But that warmer air also contained things that you do not want to be breathing, which are that particulate matter, which tends to get stuck underneath that cold layer of air.
So he sees that when he ascends the mountain, he gets into the cooler, cleaner air. And from that, decides he wants to do what exactly?
So he had learned from a friend about an organization called Breathe Utah, which did work on air quality issues on a local level, mostly at a legislative level. And he decided he was going to run a one-man fundraiser, and he was going to essentially do a jump rope for heart type idea where he was going to see how many laps he could do up and down the peak within 24 hours. And people pledged money to him for doing that feat of endurance. Everything that got pledged to him during those first few years, he then donated to Breathe Utah. And it became a little bit just of an organic thing where other runners in the valley or friends of his started saying, oh, I'm going to join you for a lap, or I'll join you for 4 laps, or I'll join you till I can't run any longer. And in that way, the fundraiser became larger and larger. And that really turned into, in 2017, the first running up for air event on Grandeur Peak was officially permitted. And we had enough people to make a race out of it and have volunteers and all the sorts of other trappings of a normal race day experience.
And how many people participated that first year and how much money was raised?
Oh, that's a really good question. I want to say on average in the early years, we were looking at about $100,000 raised, which was a huge sum for a very small group of people. I think it really caught on at first, and that's what really led the growth of people in other cities to say, this is a really cool idea. We also have this problem, and we want to do this as well.
So where are the other or the other 6 races currently being held?
Great questions. Right now, we have 4 in Utah. We have one so Salt Lake City is the main one. We have one that's an hour north of us in a city called Ogden, one that's about an hour south of Salt Lake in Provo area, and we also have one in Moab. So those are the 4 in Utah. And then we have one in Denver area that's called Stoughton Rock State Park. We also have one in
I'm like,
haven't
I've
been there?
never, no, first of all, I don't know where that state park is. Second of all, I didn't even know this event existed in my like hometown.
Yeah. It's a great one. I have since learned that a lot of runners say that it is particularly known for being very windy and very icy all winter. And it's a maximum testing ground of how much you're willing to endure in the winter months by running there.
Yeah, probably not for me, but all the same. Okay, that's 5. Where are the
Yep.
other 2?
And then we have one in Montana in Missoula. And then we have 2 in Washington, one east of Seattle and one in Bellingham.
Oh.
Yep. And so that is our current roster, but expanding quickly.
And all the funds are going to charities that are local to each of the races, or are they coming back to you and being dispersed from there? How does it work?
Our format is that we really want each race location to partner with, typically it's one organization. There are a few places that partner with more than one, but organizations that are local to where that race is held that are working actively on local air quality issues. We want to provide a great experience on race day and an introduction to this topic and the community around this topic. But our ultimate goal is that we're hooking people up with these other partner orgs. And so that they feel like they now have a relationship with that organization. They're attending other events throughout the year. They're doing advocacy work with those organizations so that this is just really the starting point of them kind of diving into making an impact on the issue.
I want to focus a little bit on Utah because I have not spent a ton of time in that state, but the time that I have spent there always strikes me as such a study in contrasts. You have a state that has just incredible natural beauty in so many places and in so many ways. It, clearly, a very large population that is very interested in environmental stewardship, and yet a government and clearly a large number of the population that is just not interested in environmental stewardship. We see, for example, I think of the 2 places that I've spent the most time. One of them is St. George, middle of a desert, a growing city that is clearly unsustainable. It is already exceeded what its resources could possibly sustain, and it shows no signs of stopping. And then Salt Lake City, the other place that I've been to, a really beautiful area, but almost like an environmental disaster in slow motion with the disappearance of the Great Salt Lake, the namesake of the city. When
Mhm.
I was there recently, which is really just the second time I've been there, it was the first time I had a chance to go up to a high point and recognize that you just could not even see the lake. It's receded so far. And I've read quite a bit about why that is and all of the powers that are at play and all of the different warring factions about water rights and everything else. So, how much have you run into resistance in terms of actually seeing the fruits of your labor result in real change? And how much have you been encouraged by the fact that you clearly have this groundswell of support?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting place to navigate that. I think that is one of the reasons that we focus on air quality. We are not ignorant to the fact that air quality is part of the larger climate disruption, climate change issue because of our roots where we started using any terminology around climate change or any of those words is automatically very divisive and could be turned off quickly. And for some reason, air quality is an issue that everyone has been able to unite behind. So even from the political level where politicians maybe have said things about climate change not being an issue or that's not top of their priority on their agenda, air quality is something that a lot of people have recognized is an issue particularly in the city or in the Salt Lake County. That is something we've always been able to get behind and be able to reach both sides of the aisle about some interventions to help that. The challenge for us has been as we go to other states, there's a lot of other states that deal with some air quality issues, a lot of other air quality environmental issues. Maybe it's more of a wildfire smoke issue. And there aren't these designated charities that are just dealing with air quality. We've really had to say, we understand this is all related. Our mission is still about air quality because, frankly, the research is pretty evident now that shows air quality is pretty much the canary in the coal mine for greater climate issues that are going to start happening in an area. So, measuring air quality is one of the primary ways you can tell that your climate overall is changing where you live.
You're trying to
Um,
backdoor things a little bit. Get
mhm.
people to work on the air quality. Maybe they'll get their head out of the sand and recognize everything else that's going on.
Yes,
It's not a bad strategy. Anything that gets people to open their eyes. That's how I always think about it. You're not supposed to be able to see the air. If you can
right.
see the air, there's a problem. And while everybody just tries to pretend, because you can't see temperature. When it's hot, people just they go where it's air conditioned and it doesn't bother them anymore. But if you can see the air that's supposed to be invisible,
Yeah.
that's obviously a problem.
Yeah.
What kinds of successes have you had? You're obviously your successes for you are fundraising, but what have been some of the tangible successes that your fundraising has led to?
I think the first success we experienced early on was just pure education. So there were a lot of endurance athletes that said, I had no idea. Like I would never think twice about running I didn't even know how to look up the AQI or that AQI should perhaps dictate when I train or where I train. So I think education was an early win. I think in a lot of areas now, the education is a little bit more progressed. And I don't think we're coming across many people that have not heard of these issues before, particularly in the endurance space. Where we'd like to have more of an impact is we traditionally see undervalued populations are living in the areas of worse air quality and they don't know it necessarily. They don't have the education now. So I do think we have an opportunity to educate a greater audience versus the extreme endurance athlete that has traditionally been who our participants are. And then I think activism, I would list as second. Just the fact to get people thinking about what are the little changes they can make in their everyday lives that reduce their carbon footprint and lead to better air quality. How can people have conversations with their circles, their friends, their family about this issue and why it affects them? I think everybody has a story to tell around it. And just getting people to have the conversation feels like a huge win versus where we were 10, 15 years ago, where no one was having this conversation. And then, of course, the funds. Like ultimately, we are partnering with these organizations because we believe in the work that they do. We believe in the continuing events and education that they're providing to the local public. So, giving them more funds to do the real work, especially when that impacts legislation, I think is a big part of it. That feels really great just to know that we have a small part in helping these people that are fighting the good fight.
Can you give me a sense of some of the groups you've worked with? I read in the intro about how you partner with organizations that are carefully selected groups who are going to demonstrate high value influence strategies. Can you paint a picture of maybe one of those groups and what they do and what they look like?
Sure. Yeah. I'll start local because that's one of our longest standing relationships. But here in Utah, our longtime partner has been Utah Clean Energy as well as Breathe Utah, both fantastic organizations that are using a huge amount of their funds to go towards legislation, education through in the local community. Breathe Utah focuses a little bit more on affecting legislation. They're really involved during the legislative sessions with trying to push bills and acts through that will bring about more clean energy or better awareness about air pollution. And then Utah Clean Energy is just at the forefront of really, I would say, number one, trying to electrify everything that they can in the state or get clean energy as a source in the state. A huge amount of grants for putting solar panels on buildings, a huge amount of for getting wind farms and solar farms and things like that throughout the state, getting people to transition. And really, I think one of the things they've helped me with the most is understanding all of the rebates when they were out there, really making sure that people understood how to take advantage of those, what the cost benefit analysis of those things really were. And they do a really good job of simplifying. If you're a homeowner, here's a list of easy wins. Here's something that might take a little bit more money. If you're currently renting, here are some things you could do. Here, if you're an owner of a business, here are some things you could do. They do a really great job of spelling out little easy wins that if a lot of people do those things, it can make a big difference.
And what are your personal feelings about where we're at right now? Because I know myself, it's hard to stay optimistic. And we're in a time right now where it seems like we can see the writing on the wall, and yet it just seems like more and more people just want to grab more paint and just
Yeah.
paint more on the wall. I feel like for every one of you, there are a lot more people with a lot deeper pockets trying to do the opposite. So I know you wouldn't be in this line of work if you didn't retain some degree of optimism, but how do you see things unfolding?
Like many of us, vacillating like daily or hourly sometimes. But I think there are some things lately that I've heard that give me a lot of hope. The momentum of the clean industry, especially clean energy industry, is going. And there's very little that can stop that because there's finances behind it. I think it's a hard time. We do need to ride out a wave of it being less important, but I don't see it going away. I think if we look at a worldview, we see that much of the world is still progressing along the same rate of cleaning things. There's a lot of good news out there coming from other countries. So that gives me hope. And then there's a lot of good information lately, too, that says, regardless of what might happen at a federal level, really the biggest difference that's going to happen is what happens on your state and your local levels. That's going to make a bigger climate difference than any large law that gets handed down. I suppose that could be good or bad, just depending on where you live, but it gives me hope that it's still worth getting very engaged at your local level and figuring out what you personally can do to be part of the solution.
You mentioned earlier the AQI and the importance of getting used to incorporating that into your own personal exercise routine. That was a big part of what we talked about, you and I, as part of that panel. I, for one, felt like it was almost revelationary in a way because while it was something that I have thought about, I don't think I recognized that it was that much of a on the front burner for a lot of these big organizations that were at that webinar. What was your takeaway? And just for listeners who may not know what I'm talking about, there was a webinar recently on air quality and its impact on endurance sport. And both Leslie and myself were panelists on that. And it was hosted by Global Sustainability in Sport. And there were many large sporting organizations. Ironman was represented, World Triathlon, UCI, just as soccer and various other large sporting organizations from around the world were represented, which I found very impressive. And just to hear the discussion around how much air quality is actually being taken into consideration for these events, I thought was, to me, quite surprising because it seemed to me that it was something I thought about personally, but it wasn't something that they were thinking about. So what did you take away from that conversation?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway was similar to yours in that I was just so impressed with the breadth of the different types of sports that were there listening in and the number of countries represented. I really didn't know what to expect going in. And to see that variety of people that were also thinking about this topic left me really hopeful and really amped up that this is on people's radar and that they are considering it as they plan events going forward.
Yeah.
And I do think things are going to have to change. Seasons of sports might have to change. Timing of events was one thing we talked a lot about. I think we're all going to have to pivot based on what environmental conditions are presented to us in areas of the world for the events that we love.
Now, for the Running Up for Air series, it occurred to me, I thought about this right away when I heard about it. You're starting low, you're starting within the inversion and then running up to the cleaner air. So that means you're exposing everybody almost purposely to the more polluted air. Is there any ethical considerations to doing it that way? Or are you doing it really just because, hey, they'd be down here exercising anyways? We want to show them the difference, and we want to show them what the potential good benefits are if the air was cleaner.
There are definitely some considerations there. I think the first thing that is a consideration is, number one, do you want hundreds of people driving to an event during a period where you're trying to get people out of their cars? So the first thing that we try and do is we do carpool, shuttle everybody in the events that it's possible to. We also incentivize carpooling or using public transport to get to the event in the cases that we aren't able to allow a shuttle. And we've had some really cool shuttles over the years, all electric. We have had electric buses that held 50 people. We had shuttle buses we were testing it essentially, and some things went wrong and we learned from it, but it was great. We got to be part of the development of an electric shuttle bus that hopefully is coming to market soon. Electric 12-passenger vans, which are coming to the market more and more. That's one sense of it where we do need to be responsible. The second part of it is we do monitor the AQI throughout the week of the race. There's some better technology now where you can predict what the AQI might be a few days out. We're communicating that if we see it could be a really bad air event at the start line. So our ethos has always been, if it is an air quality issue on the day of, you're going to get refunded. We're not going to make you participate. We've also had a exercise mask partner in the past. The company's name is Iranium out of Sweden. And we have tested a lot of masks to try and run in. This one has been the winner so far. We always give people the choice. Do you want to mask up? Do you not want to run today? Do you want to wait till later and see if it clears up? That is the irony of it. I think people are running in that weather anyhow, for the most part. Hopefully we're not forcing anyone to do that.
How have you modified your own exercise routine to take into account?
Oh boy, that's a whole
AQI
podcast.
Yeah.
I have an interesting personal story in that I moved to Salt Lake City in 2005. And actually what brought me to this area was taking a collegiate coaching job for women's soccer. I was in the soccer world for many years, coached professionally and collegiately, played as well. So I had been an athlete all my life. I moved here within about 2 years of moving here, coaching for a few hours a day, probably outside coaching for 4 or 5 hours a day, as well as my own exercise routine. I developed some pretty serious lung issues and went to a pulmonologist, and for the first time in my life was diagnosed with lung disease and asthma. I've been contending with that for about 15 years now. I am pretty rigorous about I don't do well when the AQI is high. It's actually forced me to move twice. I've moved higher in elevation twice since I've lived here. I now live at 7,500 feet, so we rarely get poor air this high, but sadly it's coming to our valley back here as well. I have the purple air monitor at my house, one inside, one outside, because indoor air can sometimes be worse in the winter. And I will definitely limit, and I'll stay indoors and run on the treadmill and run my air filters. If it's bad enough, then I know it's going to set me back worse than that workout outside would.
Wow. That was quite the answer to what I thought was an easy question.
It's not a great answer. I wish I didn't have that answer, but that's one here.
You certainly have personal experience then to bring to your work. I guess that must be rewarding in terms of what you're doing. So that's good. Leslie Keener, I cannot thank you enough for spending some time talking about this today. It's been a really interesting conversation. Leslie is the program director for the Running Up for Air series. If you'd like to know more about their events, I will have a link to the website where you could find out more and see if there's one near you. And that will, of course, be in the show notes. And I hope that you will check it out. If not to participate, then perhaps to make a donation or at least to learn more. Leslie Keener, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I wish you all the success for your events in the coming year.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Denise Haslick, and I'm a teammate of the TriDoc and a proud Patreon supporter of the TriDoc podcast. The TriDoc podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Sankoff, along with his amazing interns, Cosette Rose and Nita Takashima. You can find the show notes for everything discussed on today's episode, as well as archives of previous episodes at www.tridocpodcast.com. Do you have questions about what was discussed on this episode? Have a question about some hot new gadget or trend that sounds too good to be true that you'd like the TriDoc to sanity check on a future episode? Send Jeff an email at try_doc@icloud.com. If you're interested in coaching services, be sure to check out tridoccoaching.com or lifesportcoaching.com, where you can find information about Jeff and the services that he provides. You can also follow Jeff on the TriDoc Podcast Facebook page, TriDoc Coaching on Instagram, and the TriDoc Coaching YouTube channel. And don't forget to join the TriDoc Podcast private Facebook group. Search for it and request to join today. If you enjoyed this podcast, do the TriDoc a solid and leave a rating and a review. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you download it. And of course, there's always the option to become a supporter of the podcast at patreon.com/TriDoc podcast. The music heard at the beginning and end of the show is Radio by Empty Hours and is used with permission. This song, and many others like it, can be found at www.reverbnation.com. Be sure to visit and give small independent bands a chance. The TriDoc podcast will be back again soon to answer another medical question and chat with another amazing person in the world of multisport. Until then, train hard, train healthy.